Every Sunday afternoon, just after lunch, the Brooks family gathered at Grandpa Walter's old farmhouse. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't anyone's birthday. It was simply Sunday. And in the Brooks family, Sunday meant one thing: family challenge time. Nobody leaves until we have a winner. Grandpa Walter shouted from the front porch. His grandchildren laughed. His children rolled their eyes. And Grandma Helen smiled, because she'd heard that sentence every week for nearly 30 years. Walter Brooks was 82, a retired high school principal, father of 4, grandfather of 9. He had silver hair, bright blue eyes, and more energy than people half his age. His grandchildren often joked, "Grandpa doesn't grow older. He just becomes weirder." But Walter considered that a compliment. Every Sunday, he arrived carrying one mysterious wooden box. Inside were hundreds of folded pieces of paper. Each contained a different family challenge. No one knew what would happen next. Some Sundays, the challenge was simple: who can whistle the loudest? Other Sundays, it became complete chaos. Everyone must walk backward until dessert. 1 week, every family member had to wear someone else's shoes for an hour. Grandma accidentally wore her grandson's oversized sneakers. Walter wore pink slippers belonging to his granddaughter Lily. Michael, a 6'3" construction worker, spent lunch wearing tiny fuzzy bunny slippers. The entire family laughed so hard, they barely finished eating. Another Sunday, Walter announced, "Today's challenge: everyone over 40 must dance like they're 16 again." The grandchildren immediately pulled out their phones. "No recording," Walter laughed, "unless I win." Within minutes, the living room became a dance floor. Grandma Helen attempted disco. Michael tried breakdancing. His back immediately reminded him he wasn't 20 anymore. Everyone burst into laughter, even Michael. Every Sunday ended the same way. Someone laughed until they cried. Someone embarrassed themselves. Someone accidentally knocked over a chair. Grandpa declared, "Perfect." One afternoon, his oldest daughter Sarah finally asked, "Why do you spend so much time planning these ridiculous games?" Walter smiled. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the room. His children were laughing together. His grandchildren were chasing one another through the backyard. Grandma Helen was pretending not to cheat during a card game. Then he quietly said, "I've noticed something." Everyone looked toward him. When people laugh together, they stop arguing. When they're playing, they forget their phones. When they're making memories goo, they don't notice time passing. The room suddenly became quiet. Smiled. "So, I figured, if I can make all of you laugh, at least once every Sunday, you'll keep coming back." No one knew what to say. Then little Emma, only 7 years old, ran over and hugged him. "I'll always come back, Grandpa." Walter smiled. "I know you will." Later that afternoon, he reached into the wooden box, pulled out another folded paper. "Bonus challenge?" The family groaned dramatically. "Oh no." Michael laughed. "What now?" Walter unfolded the paper with great seriousness, then announced, "Everyone must make the ugliest face possible." For 5 seconds, absolute silence. Then, 9 grandchildren, 4 adults, Grandma, and Grandpa, all pulled the funniest, strangest, most ridiculous faces imaginable. Emma looked like a surprised squirrel. Michael puffed out his cheeks until everyone thought they might explode. Grandma crossed her eyes. Walter somehow managed to make everyone laugh before he even moved his face. Laughter echoed through the entire farmhouse. Even the neighbors could hear it. Across the fence, old Mr. Jenkins smiled while watering his garden. He whispered to his wife, "It's Sunday. The Brooks family must be playing again." Inside the farmhouse, Walter quietly looked around the room. Everyone was laughing. No one was checking their phones. Nobody was thinking about work, or bills, or stress. For one beautiful afternoon, they were simply a family. Walter smiled to himself. "This," he whispered softly, "is exactly why we do it." As the sun began to set, the family slowly packed up to leave. Children hugged their grandparents. Cars pulled away one by one. The farmhouse became quiet again. Walter carried the wooden challenge box back into his study. He carefully opened it. Inside, hundreds of folded game ideas waited. Some were funny, some were silly, some had never been used. He smiled, picked up a pen, and wrote one more challenge. Make someone laugh who had a difficult week. He folded the paper carefully, placed it into the box, closed the lid, then smiled. Next Sunday, he whispered, we'll have even more fun. Outside. The last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills. Inside the old farmhouse, another Sunday had become another memory. Not because of the games, but because a grandfather understood something many people forget. Families don't grow closer by spending more money. They grow closer by spending more time together. The next Sunday, Brooks' family arrived at Grandpa Walter's farmhouse earlier than usual. But this time, something felt different. Every grandchild kept whispering. Every adult smiled suspiciously. Even Grandma Helen was trying very hard not to laugh. Walter looked around the kitchen, raised one eyebrow. Why is everyone acting so innocent? A 9-year-old Emma quickly answered, we're always innocent. Walter looked at Grandma Helen. She shrugged. I have absolutely no idea, she said, then immediately started giggling. Walter smiled to himself. Oh, he whispered. They're planning something. After lunch, everyone gathered in the backyard. The famous wooden challenge box sat on the picnic table. Walter rubbed his hands together dramatically. All right, who's ready for today's challenge? The family cheered. Walter reached into the box, pulled out a folded paper, slowly opened it, then smiled. Today's challenge. Everyone must balance a spoon on their nose for 30 seconds. The grandchildren burst into laughter. That's impossible! Walter proudly balanced the spoon on his nose. See, I still have talent. Exactly 3 seconds later, the spoon fell. Everyone applauded anyway. Then, the family exchanged secret glances. It was time. Sarah suddenly pointed behind Walter. There's a squirrel wearing sunglasses. Walter turned around immediately. What? At that exact moment, every grandchild rushed toward the wooden challenge box. They quickly removed every folded paper, replacing them with their own. Each new challenge was much sillier than Grandpa's. Emma whispered, he'll never notice. Walter slowly turned back around, smiling far too calmly. The squirrel left already, he said. The children froze. Had he noticed? Walter walked toward the box, reached inside, pulled out the first paper. He unfolded it, read silently, then looked confused. Today's challenge says, Grandpa must wear a chicken hat. The grandchildren exploded with laughter. Walter looked at the paper, then at everyone else. Oh, he smiled. I see. Without saying another word, he disappeared into the house. Everyone waited. 30 seconds later, Walter returned, wearing not only a giant yellow chicken hat, but matching orange rain boots, a feather bow, and oversized sunglasses. The grandchildren laughed so hard several fell onto the grass. Michael couldn't even stand upright. Dad, he gasped. Where did you even get that? Walter smiled proudly. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to choose this challenge. The entire family stared at him. You planned this? Sarah laughed. Walter winked. I own more costumes than you realize. He reached into another closet in the garage. Out came a pirate hat, a cowboy outfit, a superhero cape, a fake mustache, 3 clown wigs, and something that looked suspiciously like an inflatable dinosaur costume. Emma couldn't breathe from laughing. Grandpa, you've been hiding all these. Walter nodded proudly. A family man should always be prepared. The next challenge read, everyone must talk like a pirate until dessert. Within minutes, the backyard sounded completely ridiculous. Ahoy, pass the potatoes. Matey, where be the lemonade? Grandma Helen accidentally called the dog Captain. The dog wagged his tail anyway. Then came another paper. Grandpa must dance for 1 full minute. Walter smiled. My favorite. The grandchildren turned on old 1970s disco music. Walter started dancing. Surprisingly, he wasn't bad. Michael joined him. Then Sarah. Then Emma within moments. The entire backyard had become one giant dance floor. Even Mr. Jenkins, watching from next door, started dancing while watering his flowers. Later that afternoon, Emma quietly walked over to Grandpa. Weren't you surprised? She asked. Walter smiled. About what? Our prank. Walter laughed. I knew the moment you all arrived. Emma looked shocked. You did? Walter nodded. You forgot one thing. What? Walter pointed toward the challenge box. I know exactly. How many papers are inside? Emma covered her face. We're terrible spies. Walter laughed so hard tears rolled down his cheeks. Your wonderful grandchildren. He gently placed one hand on Emma's shoulder. You know something. The best family traditions aren't the ones that go perfectly. They're the ones everyone laughs about 20 years later. Emma smiled. I think we'll remember today forever. Walter looked around the backyard. Every child was laughing. Every adult had forgotten about work. Even Grandma Helen still wore the pirate hat. He quietly whispered to himself, mission accomplished. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Walter opened the challenge box once again. He removed one of the prank papers, smiled, then wrote a note beneath it. Family rule quate 17 if your grandchildren prank you. Pretend you didn't notice. They'll laugh even harder. He folded the paper carefully, placed it back inside, closed the lid, and chuckled all the way into the house. Because sometimes, the funniest part of a prank is letting everyone believe it worked. The following Sunday, the Brooks family arrived carrying casseroles, desserts, and enough lemonade to fill a small swimming pool. The backyard was already decorated. Colorful balloons swayed in the breeze. Grandpa Walter stood proudly beside the picnic table. This time, he was holding something unusual. A giant rubber chicken, nearly 3 feet tall, bright yellow, ridiculously ugly. Michael burst into laughter. Dad, please tell me that isn't today's challenge. Walter grinned. It absolutely is. The grandchildren immediately gathered around. Emma poked the rubber chicken. It squeaks? Walter nodded proudly. It certainly does. He cleared his throat dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first annual No Company Makes Holiday! The family applauded, mostly because they had no idea what was coming. Walter held up the rubber chicken. Today's rule is simple. If anyone complains, they must wear this chicken around their neck for the rest of the afternoon. The grandchildren laughed so hard they nearly fell over. That's easy. Would never complain. Walter slowly looked at his daughter. Oh, at that exact moment, a mosquito landed on Sarah's arm. She slapped it away. Oh, come on. Walter immediately pointed at her. Complaint. The family erupted with laughter. No fair, Sarah protested. Walter carefully placed the giant rubber chicken around her neck. Every step she took, the chicken squeaked. Emma laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes. You look amazing, Mom. Sarah shook her head. I look ridiculous. Walter smiled. That's another complaint. Everyone laughed even harder. 10 minutes later, Michael opened a bottle of soda, sprayed all over his shirt. Oh, great. Walter pointed dramatically. Complaint. Now Michael wore the rubber chicken too. Grandma Helen quietly whispered, I'm staying very quiet today. Walter smiled. Smart woman. The afternoon continued. Children played soccer. Adults grilled hamburgers. Music drifted across the backyard. Then, Emma accidentally dropped an entire bowl of potato salad. Everyone froze. Emma looked terrified. She whispered. Walter walked over, knelt beside her, then smiled. Accidents. Errant complaints. He handed her another spoon. Let's make an even better one. Emma smiled with relief. Half an hour later, Walter himself reached for another hamburger. The plate slipped from his hands. The hamburger landed directly on his shoe. He looked down, then quietly muttered, Well, that's annoying. The entire family gasped. Michael jumped to his feet. The grandchildren cheered louder than if their favorite team had won a championship. Walter looked around dramatically. I don't remember saying anything. Emma laughed. We all heard it. Walter sighed dramatically. I suppose rules are rules. Michael carefully placed the giant rubber chicken around Grandpa's neck. Every time Walter walked, the chicken squeaked. The grandchildren laughed so hard, Grandma Helen had to wipe tears from her eyes. Walter looked down at the rubber chicken, then proudly announced, I have never looked more distinguished. The laughter started all over again. Later, Walter gathered everyone beneath the old maple tree. So, he smiled. What did we learn today? Michael raised his hand. Never complain around Dad. Everyone laughed. Walter shook his head. Close. He looked around the circle. Life gives us plenty of reasons to complain. The weather. Traffic. A burned hamburger. A squeaky chicken. The family smiled. But today, did anyone notice something? Sarah thought for a moment. We laughed instead. Walter nodded. Exactly. Sometimes. Humor doesn't remove the problem. It simply makes the problem smaller. Emma quietly looked at the rubber chicken. If we laugh more, why complain less? Walter smiled proudly. I couldn't have said it better myself. As the sun began to set, the grandchildren secretly hid the rubber chicken inside Grandpa's favorite rocking chair. When Walter sat down, "Squeak!" The entire backyard exploded with laughter one final time. Walter stood up dramatically, looked around. I have been ambushed. Emma laughed so hard she could barely breathe. Grandma Helen shook her head. I married the right man. She smiled. Life has never been boring. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Walter carried the rubber chicken back into his study. He carefully placed it beside the wooden challenge box, then opened his notebook. He wrote challenge Fairy 34 no complaining Sunday. Result, everyone laughed, even the chicken. Walter smiled, closed the notebook, turned off the light, then quietly whispered, if they keep laughing like this, they'll keep coming home. Outside, the porch light glowed softly in the evening air. Inside the old farmhouse, another ordinary Sunday had become another unforgettable family memory. Not because everything had gone perfectly, because everyone had chosen to laugh together. The following Sunday, Grandpa Walter stood in the middle of the backyard wearing a bright red bow tie. Beside him stood an old microphone connected to a tiny speaker. A handmade banner stretched between two trees. It read Barao Cas a Familotelitas Obu. Michael laughed. Which one of us actually has talent? Walter grinned. That's exactly today's challenge. The whole family stared at him. He slowly unfolded another paper from the wooden challenge box. Then announced, today's rule, you must perform a talent you absolutely do now have. The grandchildren burst into laughter. Emma immediately raised her hand. So, if I can't sing, I should sing. Walter pointed at her proudly. Exactly. Grandma Helen whispered to Sarah, I have a terrible feeling your father has been planning this for months. Walter overheard. Ears. He corrected with a smile. One by one, family members picked random talent cards from a basket. Michael unfolded his card. Magic show, he groaned. I don't even know one magic trick. Walter smiled. Perfect. Sarah opened hers. Opera singing, she immediately laughed. I sound like a broken lawnmower. Walter nodded. Excellent choice. Emma opened hers. Stand-up comedy, she smiled. I only know one joke. Walter laughed. Then tell it 3 times. The show began. Michael walked onto the tiny stage wearing Grandpa's old magician's cape. He held a deck of cards upside down. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall now make this card disappear. He threw the card into the air. The wind caught it. It landed in Grandma Helen's lemonade. The entire family exploded with laughter. Michael bowed dramatically. Exactly as planned. Next came Sarah. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, then attempted an opera performance. The first note echoed across the backyard. A dog somewhere down the street started howling. Another dog answered. Within seconds, half the neighborhood's dogs had joined the concert. Walter laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Sarah finished with a dramatic bow. Frank, I've just started a neighborhood choir. The applause was louder than ever. Emma stepped onto the stage next, holding a tiny notebook. I have one joke, she announced proudly. What do you call a sleeping dinosaur? The family looked at one another. Emma smiled. Snore. A complete silence. Then Grandpa Walter laughed. Not just laughed, he laughed so hard, his glasses slipped off. Soon, everyone else started laughing too. Not because the joke was especially funny, but because Grandpa couldn't stop laughing. Emma smiled proudly. I told you it was a good joke. Walter wiped away tears. It gets better every time. The afternoon continued. Grandma Helen attempted juggling. She accidentally tossed an orange into Grandpa's hat. Uncle David tried ballet. His cowboy boots squeaked across the patio. Little Noah played the harmonica, backwards. No one knew that was even possible. Then, Walter announced one final performance. My turn. The family cheered. Walter disappeared into the house. A few moments later, he returned wearing sunglasses, a glitter jacket, and carrying an old inflatable guitar. Michael laughed. What are you doing? Walter smiled. Living out a dream. The speaker suddenly blasted old rock and roll music from the 1970s. Walter jumped onto the little stage, pretending to play guitar. Spinning, dancing, sliding across the porch. Halfway through his performance, his inflatable guitar suddenly lost air. It slowly folded in half. Walter stared at it, then looked at everyone. I've been defeated by modern technology. The family laughed harder than ever. Even Mr. Jenkins next door leaned over the fence, applauding. When the music ended, Walter bowed dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank my very expensive inflatable guitar. Emma shouted. It cost $5. Walter nodded seriously. Exactly. The finest $5 I've ever spent. That evening, the family gathered around the fire pit. Marshmallows roasted over glowing coals. The stars slowly appeared overhead. Sarah smiled. Do you know something? Walter looked up. What? I don't remember who won today. Walter smiled. There wasn't a winner. Michael looked surprised. There wasn't. Walter gently shook his head. The goal was never to win. He looked around the circle. The goal was to make sure. Everyone had a reason to laugh. The grandchildren quietly smiled. Even the adults became thoughtful. Walter reached into the wooden challenge box one last time that evening. He unfolded a blank card, then slowly wrote, Talent show rule, if everyone laughs, everyone wins. He folded the paper carefully, placed it back inside the box, then looked toward his family. The backyard echoed with laughter once more. The kind of laughter that couldn't be bought, couldn't be planned, couldn't be replaced. And Walter quietly realized those ordinary Sunday afternoons were slowly becoming the happiest memories his family would ever carry. The next Sunday, the grandchildren noticed something unusual the moment they arrived. The backyard looked like a miniature sports stadium. Colorful flags fluttered in the breeze. A homemade banner stretched across two oak trees. It read B-OKS FAMILOLOYMPACS underneath. In Grandpa Walter's handwriting, winning is optional. Laughing is mandatory. Michael burst into laughter. Please tell me there isn't an opening ceremony. Walter smiled proudly. There absolutely is. A tiny speaker suddenly played triumphant Olympic music. Walter marched into the backyard carrying an old flashlight wrapped in aluminum foil. Olympic torch, he announced. Emma whispered to Noah, I think Grandpa watches too much television. Walter overheard. I call it research. Everyone applauded as he carefully placed a torch into a flower pot. Let the games begin! Event 1, backward relay race. Each family member had to run backward across the lawn. No turning around. No looking behind. Michael took 3 steps. Immediately bumped into a garden chair. I meant to do that, he insisted. Walter blew a whistle. Minus style points. Grandma Helen somehow won her round. Everyone stared. Were you practicing? Sarah laughed. Helen smiled. I raised 4 children. You learned to walk backward. The grandchildren had no idea whether she was joking. Event 2, balloon balance challenge. Everyone had to carry a balloon on their head while walking across the yard. Emma made it halfway. The balloon floated away. Noah chased his balloon into Grandpa's tomato garden. Walter looked at the tomatoes, looked at Noah, then sighed dramatically. The tomatoes have joined the Olympics. The entire family laughed. Event 3, legged race. This year's teams were chosen randomly. Michael was paired with 6-year-old Emma, Sarah with Grandpa, Grandma Helen with 12-year-old Liam. Walter looked at Sarah. Remember, if we fall with confidence. The whistle blew. Every team took exactly 2 steps before collapsing into a pile of laughter. Grandpa somehow landed sitting on the grass, still smiling. Emma laughed so hard, she couldn't even stand back up. After 3 attempts, nobody had reached the finish line. Walter proudly raised both hands. I declare, a universal victory. Michael laughed. We didn't finish. Walter nodded.
Exactly.
But everyone smiled. That's finishing. Event 4, Mystery Obstacle Course. Walter had secretly built an obstacle course around the backyard. Participants had to crawl under a picnic table, hop like a bunny, spin around 5 times, balance a cookie on their forehead, then quack like a duck before crossing the finish line. Sarah stopped halfway. Dad, who invents these things? Walter smiled. A very experienced grandfather. Emma crossed the finish line first, but forgot to quack. Walter shook his head, disqualified. Emma immediately shouted,
QAFK!
Walter thought for a moment. Accepted. Final event, the family tug of war, adults versus grandchildren. The rope stretched across the lawn. Walter stood in the middle, serving as referee. Ready, set, pull. For nearly 10 seconds. Nothing happened. Then, the rope snapped. Everyone fell backward at exactly the same moment. Grandma landed on a pile of cushions. Michael rolled into the grass. Walter somehow ended up wearing the referee whistle around his ankle. The grandchildren laughed until their stomachs hurt. Even the family dog started barking excitedly. As everyone stood up, Walter quietly looked around. Grass stains, dirty shoes, windblown hair, huge smiles. He couldn't have asked for a better afternoon. Just before sunset, Walter gathered everyone together. I have one final challenge. The family groaned dramatically. Oh no, another one. Walter smiled. The easiest challenge today. Everyone waited. He handed the camera to Mr. Jenkins, then announced, everyone, make the funniest face you've got. The camera clicked. Emma stuck out her tongue. Michael crossed his eyes. Sarah puffed out her cheeks. Grandma pretended to snore. Walter somehow looked sillier than everyone else. The picture came out completely ridiculous. Nobody looked elegant. Nobody looked serious. It instantly became the family's favorite photograph. Years later, whenever someone had a difficult week, they would pull out that photo. Within seconds, everyone laughed again. That evening, after the family had gone home, Walter carried the framed picture into his study. He placed it beside dozens of older family photos, pictures, graduation pictures, birthday pictures. Then, right in the middle, he placed the Family Olympics photo. He smiled. Perfect. A Grandma Helen walked into the room, looked at the picture, then laughed. I've never seen Michael look that ridiculous. Walter nodded proudly. I have. He was too. They both laughed. Before going to bed, Walter opened the wooden challenge box. He removed one blank card. Then carefully wrote Family Olympics, gold medal. Everyone who laughed today. He folded the card, placed it inside, closed the lid, then whispered softly, I think they'll remember this one. Outside, fireflies danced across the backyard. Inside the old farmhouse, another ordinary Sunday had become another unforgettable chapter in the Brooks family's story. Not because someone won a race, because everyone crossed the finish line together, laughing. The following Sunday, the Brooks family walked into the farmhouse expecting another silly game. Michael guessed there would be another relay race. Sarah expected another costume contest. Emma secretly hoped Grandpa had bought another giant rubber chicken. Instead, Walter stood in the living room wearing a referee whistle. Behind him hung a large sign. SCUITH live ESUDY. Everyone looked confused. Michael scratched his head. Dad, what exactly does that mean? Walter smiled mischievously. For the next 3 hours, parents become children. Children become parents. And, he paused dramatically, grandparents become teenagers. The grandchildren erupted into laughter. Emma jumped excitedly. Does that mean I get to be the boss? Walter pointed at her. Exactly. He pulled a shiny homemade badge from his pocket. Across the front it read, Familo OS. He carefully pinned it onto Emma's shirt. Congratulations. You are now in charge. And Emma stood as tall as she could. I've been preparing for this my whole life. Michael laughed. Should we be worried? Walter grinned. Very. And Emma immediately clapped her hands. All right, everyone. Parents, go clean your rooms. Michael looked around. My room. Emma nodded seriously. The guest bedroom. no phones, no television, and make your bed neatly. The grandchildren laughed as 4 grown adults slowly walked upstairs pretending to grumble. Sarah sighed dramatically. I don't want to. Emma crossed her arms. I don't remember asking. Walter whispered to Grandma Helen. She's a natural. Meanwhile, Walter declared that he was now 16 years old again. He borrowed Michael's baseball cap, turned it backward, pulled out an old skateboard from the garage. Grandma Helen burst into laughter. Walter, you haven't touched that skateboard in 40 years. Walter smiled confidently. I still remember. He stepped onto the board, rolled forward, exactly 2 feet, then carefully stepped back off. I also remember. That sidewalks are much harder than they used to be. Everyone applauded anyway. Emma returned carrying a clipboard. Inspection time. She marched upstairs, checking every bedroom. Michael's bed had 1 wrinkled pillow. Emma frowned. Not good enough. Michael sighed dramatically. I tried. Emma shook her head. You can do better. Walter laughed so hard he nearly spilled his lemonade. The next activity was homework. Every adult received a worksheet created by the grandchildren. Questions included name 3 dinosaurs. Draw your favorite superhero. Spell hippopotamus. Michael looked horrified. I don't even know how many P's are in hippopotamus. Emma smiled. Neither do I. Good luck. Across the room, Grandma Helen quietly colored outside the lines on purpose. Emma walked over. Grandma, you need to stay inside the picture. Helen looked innocent. My crayons got excited. The grandchildren laughed until they couldn't breathe. Later that afternoon, Walter announced recess. Every adult had to play tag. No excuses. Michael immediately pretended his knees hurt. Emma blew Grandpa's referee whistle. No pretending. You have 5 seconds. Soon, 4 adults were running around the backyard while 9 children chased them. Walter stood beside the fence cheering loudly. Faster! You'll never catch Sarah. Sarah accidentally ran into Grandpa. Both burst into laughter. Grandma Helen finally tagged Michael. I won, she shouted. Michael pretended to collapse dramatically. I've been defeated. By my own mother. As everyone caught their breath, Emma called one final family meeting. She stood on a small wooden chair, trying to look as official as possible. I have an announcement. Everyone became quiet. Emma looked at each family member. I think being a grown-up looks really tiring. The adults smiled. Then she added, and I think being a kid looks harder than adults think. Walter gently nodded. Exactly. He looked around the room. That's why we switched. When you spend one afternoon seeing life through someone else's eyes, you become kinder. Michael smiled. I never realized how often I tell my kids to clean their rooms. Sarah laughed. And now you know how annoying it sounds. Everyone burst into laughter again. Before sunset, Walter gathered the family on the porch. He opened the wooden challenge box, removed a blank card, then carefully wrote Switch, Live Sunday, Best Lesson. Everyone has a job that's harder than it looks. Laugh before you judge. He folded the card, placed it into the box, then closed the lid with a satisfied smile. As the family prepared to leave, Emma walked over to Grandpa. She handed him the little family boss badge. I think, she said proudly, you can have your job back now. Walter laughed. Thank goodness. He clipped the badge onto Emma's jacket instead. None. I think. You earned it. Emma beamed with pride. She wore that little badge every Sunday afterward. Not because she was the boss, but because it reminded her that the happiest families weren't the ones who never argued. They were the ones who laughed together, even while pretending to be someone else. That evening, Walter watched the last car disappear down the country road. The farmhouse became quiet once more. He smiled as he looked at the challenge box. 40 years of silly games, hundreds of ridiculous ideas, thousands of unforgettable laughs, and somehow, every Sunday, the house still felt just a little fuller than the week before. Several years passed. The Sunday games never stopped. Not even when Grandpa Walter needed a walking cane. Not even when Grandma Helen reminded him to sit down more often. Every Sunday, the wooden challenge box still appeared on the picnic table. And every Sunday, the The Brooks family laughed until sunset. But one autumn morning, something felt different. Walter moved more slowly than usual. His smile was still there. His eyes still sparkled, yet his grandchildren noticed he paused more often. Sometimes, just to catch his breath. Emma quietly walked beside him. "Are you okay?" Walter smiled. "I'm wonderful." Then he winked. "I'm just charging my batteries a little slower these days." Emma laughed. "Can I help?" Walter handed her the wooden challenge box. "I think it's your turn to carry it." She held it proudly. It felt much heavier than she expected. "What's inside?" she asked. Walter smiled. 40 years of laughter. That afternoon, the family expected another silly competition. Instead, Walter gathered everyone beneath the old maple tree. The challenge box sat quietly on the picnic table. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking. I've created hundreds of games, but today, I'd like all of you to create one." The grandchildren looked at each other. "We make the challenge?" Noah asked. Walter nodded. "The funniest family wins." Within minutes, the backyard became wonderfully chaotic. Emma invented the Marshmallow Tower Challenge. Everyone had to build the tallest tower using marshmallows and spaghetti. Michael accidentally ate half the marshmallows. "Evidence!" Emma shouted. Michael smiled innocently. "I was testing quality." The grandchildren laughed. Sarah invented laugh without smiling. Whoever smiled first lost. Walter lasted exactly 4 seconds. Grandma Helen simply looked at him, raised one eyebrow. Walter burst into laughter immediately. "I blame your grandmother," he announced. The next game came from Liam. Everyone had to imitate another family member. Emma walked around pretending to be Grandpa, hands behind her back, talking in a deep voice. "Rule number 1. If nobody laughs, we're doing another challenge." The whole family applauded. Walter laughed until tears filled his eyes. "I do sound like that." Grandma Helen stood up next. She pretended to be Michael, holding an imaginary toolbox. "Has anyone seen my measuring tape?" Michael laughed. "I've actually said that today." As the afternoon continued, no one checked the time. Phones stayed inside. The television remained off. The only sounds were laughter, footsteps, and stories. Just before sunset, Walter quietly walked toward the picnic table. He opened the wooden challenge box, then removed a small envelope. No one had ever seen it before. Across the front, it simply read "Open together." The family gathered around. Walter handed the envelope to Emma. "I think you should read it." Emma carefully unfolded the paper. It read, "Dear Brooks family, if you're reading this together, then today's game worked perfectly." Everyone smiled. Emma continued. "The real challenge was never the games. It was getting everyone into the same backyard on the same Sunday, again and again." Michael quietly looked at his father. Emma kept reading. "Someday, I won't be standing here blowing the whistle." The family suddenly became quiet. "When that day comes, please don't stop meeting. The games don't matter, the people do." Sarah quietly wiped away a tear. Walter smiled gently. "I wrote that years ago, just in case." Emma looked up. "So, the treasure wasn't inside the box?" Walter softly shook his head. "No." Then he looked around at every child, every grandchild, every smiling face gathered beneath the old maple tree. "As always been sitting around me." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then little Noah suddenly raised his hand. "I have one more game." Walter laughed. "What is it?" Noah grinned. "Everyone has to hug Grandpa." Without another word, the grandchildren ran toward him. Then the adults joined. Even Grandma Helen squeezed into the middle. Walter disappeared inside the biggest family hug anyone had ever seen. His voice could barely be heard. "I can't breathe." He laughed. "But I wouldn't trade this for anything." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Walter sat quietly on the front porch. The challenge box rested beside him. He gently ran his hand across its worn wooden lid. 40 years. Hundreds of games. Thousands of laughs. One family, still choosing to spend Sundays together. He smiled toward the quiet backyard. "I think," he whispered, "we did all right." The porch light glowed warmly as the stars appeared overhead. Inside the old farmhouse, the challenge box waited patiently. not just holding folded pieces of paper, but holding decades of laughter, ready for the next generation. 5 years later, the old Brooks farmhouse looked exactly the same. The white porch still welcomed visitors. The old maple tree still stretched across the backyard. The picnic table still stood beneath its branches. And every Sunday, cars still filled the driveway. But this Sunday, something was different. For the first time, Grandpa Walter wasn't there to greet everyone. No loud whistle, no funny hat, no dramatic announcement, only a quiet breeze, moving through the trees he had loved so much. Walter had passed away peacefully the previous winter, surrounded by his family, with a smile on his face, exactly the way everyone imagined he would. The grandchildren had grown up. Emma was now 25, a kindergarten teacher. Noah had become an engineer. Liam had recently married. Even the youngest great-grandchildren now ran across the same backyard where their parents had once played Grandpa's silly games. After lunch, everyone became unusually quiet. The wooden challenge box rested in the center of the picnic table. No one touched it. Some traditions feel impossible to continue without the person who started them. Finally, Grandma Helen stood. She smiled gently. "I think, your grandfather would be very disappointed." The family looked at her. He never liked quiet Sundays. Everyone laughed softly, exactly as Walter would have wanted. Helen carefully lifted the wooden box. The corners were worn smooth after decades of use. She placed it in front of little Sophie, Walter's youngest great-granddaughter, only 6 years old. "Would you like to open it?" Sophie nodded eagerly. She slowly lifted the lid. Inside, hundreds of folded challenge cards still waited, exactly where Grandpa had left them. But resting on top was one envelope, larger than the others. Across the front, Walter had written in bold letters, "FORTH FIRST SUN DYME." No one spoke. Emma gently unfolded the letter. Her voice trembled as she began reading. "Well, if you're reading this, then I finally missed a Sunday." A few people laughed through their tears. "That sounded exactly like Grandpa." Emma continued. "Don't waste too much time being sad. I've probably already challenged St. Peter to a 3-legged race." The children giggled. Even Grandma Helen smiled. The letter continued. "Remember, the games were never the important part. The important part was hearing this backyard full of laughter." Emma looked around. Every face was smiling. She kept reading. "So today, I have one final challenge for all of you." Sophie whispered excitedly, "What's the challenge?" Emma smiled through tears. She turned the page. Across the top, Walter had written in large letters, KLEHI beneath it. Only 3 simple rules appeared. Rule 1, never let anyone eat Sunday dessert alone. Rule 2, take a family photo every week. Even if everyone's hair looks terrible. The entire family burst into laughter. Michael instinctively reached for his thinning hair. Walter had anticipated the joke years earlier. Rule 3, teach the next generation at least one silly game every year. Emma paused, then read the final paragraph. If children stop laughing in this backyard, the games are over. But if someone laughs here every Sunday, then I'll still be part of the family gathering. No one could hold back their tears. Not because they were grieving, but because Walter had somehow found one last way to make everyone smile. Little Sophie suddenly raised her hand.
"I know a game."
Everyone looked toward her. "What is it?" Emma asked. Sophie grinned. "Everyone has to tell the funniest Grandpa story they remember." Grandma Helen clapped first. "Think." He would absolutely approve. For the next 2 hours, the backyard echoed with stories. The day Grandpa accidentally grilled hot dogs without removing the plastic wrapper. The time he wore 2 different shoes to church and insisted it was the newest fashion. The afternoon he challenged the mailman to a water balloon fight and lost. The famous rubber chicken, the pirate voices, the backward relay race, the terrible opera contest. Every story ended exactly the same way, with laughter, real laughter, the kind Walter had always believed could heal almost anything. Just before sunset, Emma carried an old camera into the yard. "Family picture," she shouted. Everyone gathered beneath the maple tree. Michael smiled normally. Emma quickly stopped him. "What?" She laughed. "Grandpa's rule. The funniest face possible. Within seconds, 3 family members made the most ridiculous expressions imaginable. Sophie crossed her eyes. Noah puffed out his cheeks. Grandma Helen pretended to snore. Even the family dog somehow looked confused. The camera clicked. Everyone immediately burst into laughter. Emma looked at the photograph, then quietly smiled. It looks perfect. That evening, before everyone left, Sophie walked to the wooden challenge box. She pulled out one blank card. Carefully wrote in large, uneven letters, "Challenge 401, make someone laugh today." Then she added one final sentence. "Grandpa would like this one." She folded the paper, placed it gently inside the box, closed the lid, then hugged it tightly. As the last cars disappeared down the country road, the old farmhouse became quiet once more. The porch light glowed softly. The maple leaves rustled in the evening breeze. Somewhere, it almost felt as though Grandpa Walter's laughter drifted across the backyard one more time. Not because anyone imagined hearing it, but because every smile, every joke, every family hug still carried a little piece of him. Walter Brooks never left behind great wealth. He never built a famous business. He never appeared on television. Instead, he left something far more valuable. A family that looked forward to Sundays. Children who grew up believing laughter belonged at the dinner table. Grandchildren who understood that time together was life's greatest gift. And great-grandchildren who would someday invent silly games of their own. Because Walter had discovered a simple truth. Families don't stay close by accident. They stay close because someone keeps giving them reasons to come home. The end title: every Sunday, Grandpa invented a silly family game. Years later, it became our favorite tradition.